He looked me straight in the eyes across our marble kitchen island and said, "You'll never be more than what I made you." That night, something inside me broke, and then something else was born. Stay with me till the end, because what happened after that moment changed everything I thought I knew about love, success, and myself. And if my story makes you feel something, don't forget to tap that like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. My name is Emily Green. I'm 32, and for the last 7 years, I've been living in what looked like a dream. My husband, Declan, was everything people wanted to be: successful, handsome, confident. We lived in a high-rise penthouse in Atlanta, drove luxury cars, and hosted dinner parties where people pretended to admire me, but really only saw Declan's wife. When I met him, I was a junior interior designer trying to make a name for myself. He said he loved my ambition, my ideas, the way I saw beauty in small spaces. But somewhere between our wedding vows and his growing empire, that love turned into control. He started to correct the way I spoke at dinners, picked my clothes before events, even told me which friends were good influences. At first, I thought he was helping me become better, more polished, more successful. But little by little, I disappeared. He told me to quit my job, said he wanted me to focus on being his partner in life. I didn't see it then, but what he really meant was he wanted me to stop being me. Every time I brought up my dream of starting my own interior design firm, he'd laugh lightly and say, "Why would you stress yourself with that when you already have everything?" Everything, of course, meant everything he provided. That night in the kitchen, I had told him I was thinking of going back to work, just part-time. His face hardened instantly. He poured his drink, looked at me like I was something fragile but foolish, and said those words that cut deeper than any knife. "You'll never be more than what I made you." It was such a quiet moment, yet it felt like thunder in my chest. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just stood there, feeling something new forming inside me, a kind of still anger that didn't shout, didn't break anything. It just promised. He turned away, already done with the conversation, not realizing that while he was sipping his expensive whiskey, I was making a silent vow. That would be the last night I ever tried to convince him of my worth. Because from that moment on, I stopped trying to be what he wanted, and started remembering who I used to be. I met Declan at a networking event I almost didn't go to. I was 25, standing in the corner of a hotel ballroom clutching a cheap glass of wine, feeling completely out of place among people who spoke in deals and investments. He was the kind of man who owned the room without even trying. Tall, confident, expensive suit, easy smile. When he noticed me, it felt like being chosen out of a crowd I didn't belong to. He walked straight up to me, introduced himself like I should already know his name. "Declan Green," he said, extending his hand. "Real estate development." I told him I was an interior design assistant at a small firm, and he smiled like that was the most charming thing he'd ever heard. "You make spaces beautiful," he said. "I build them. We'd make a good team." It sounded like a line, but it worked. In the beginning, he made me feel seen in ways I hadn't before. He praised my creativity, said I had potential, and just needed the right direction. He invited me to dinners where people who used to ignore me suddenly cared what I thought, mostly because I was with him. I told myself that being with someone like Declan meant I was growing, leveling up. But little by little, his advice became correction. He'd look at my outfits and say, "That color doesn't fit your new image." He'd coach me on how to talk in public, how to keep my voice calm and my laughter softer. "You're smart," he'd say, "but people respect quiet confidence." When I wanted to meet my old friends, he'd frown and tell me they were holding me back. "They don't understand where we're going." At first, I thought he was just helping me improve. But soon I realized every part of me was being reshaped to fit the picture he wanted. When we got married, he told me I didn't need to work anymore. "Let me take care of you," he said with that same easy smile. "You'll have time to focus on yourself." I didn't notice until much later that yourself meant his version of me. My sister Zola saw it before I did. She told me, "You're fading, Emily. You used to have opinions. You used to laugh with your whole chest." I brushed her off, said she didn't understand how relationships worked. But she was right. I was shrinking slowly, quietly. One night, months after the wedding, I told him I missed working. He put down his glass and stared at me with that calm, cold look that always made me feel like I was the one out of line. "You wouldn't last a day without me," he said. I didn't answer. I just smiled weakly and looked away. But something about those words stuck deep in my chest, like a seed waiting for its time to grow. It started small, the kind of things you tell yourself not to worry about. Declan began coming home later and later, always with a new excuse. Client dinners, he'd say, loosening his tie. Networking, or the market's crazy right now. I wanted to believe him. I told myself every successful man works hard. But then his phone started living face down on the counter. The ringer was always off, and when it buzzed, he'd pick it up and walk into another room. One evening while folding laundry, I found a gift receipt in his pocket from an expensive jewelry store. The date was 2 weeks before my birthday, so I smiled, thinking maybe he'd surprised me. But on my birthday, there was no jewelry, just flowers from an assistant and a quick dinner because he had to catch a flight in the morning. I remember staring at him across the table, trying to match his words with the feeling in my chest that something was off. A few days later, my friend Yara called me. Her voice was hesitant, uneasy. "Emily, I don't want to get in your business, but I saw Declan at the Ember Lounge last night." I laughed nervously and said, "He probably had a meeting there." Then she paused. He wasn't alone. He was with a woman. Young. Tall. Blonde. They looked close. My stomach turned cold. I thanked her, hung up, and just sat on the couch staring at nothing for a long time. That night, when he came home, I asked him about it, my voice shaking even though I tried to sound calm. "Were you at the Ember Lounge last night?" He didn't even blink. "Yeah, with clients." "Why?" I told him someone saw him there with another woman. He gave a small, tired laugh, like I was a child who had misunderstood something simple. "Emily, you've got to stop overthinking everything. You know how people talk." When I pressed, his expression hardened. "You're being paranoid," he said. "Ungrateful, even. Do you realize how much I do for us? You have a beautiful life, and this is what you choose to focus on." Then, as if to end the conversation, he added, "You should focus on being a wife instead of acting like an investigator." The way he said it made me question myself. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe stress was making me see things that weren't there. For the next few weeks, I tried to let it go, tried to be the calm, supportive wife he always wanted me to be. I cooked his favorite meals, smiled when he came home, ignored the phone that always stayed locked. But the truth has a way of finding its way out. One morning, while putting away his suit jackets before the cleaners arrived, something slipped from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. A hotel receipt. 2 nights, the Westbridge downtown. Paid in full. And just like that, every doubt I had buried came roaring back to life. The morning I found that hotel receipt, something inside me went quiet. Not broken, just still. I didn't scream or throw things. I didn't even confront him again. I just folded the paper neatly, put it in my drawer, and decided to start paying attention. Declan thought he was untouchable, that I was still the same woman who believed every story he told. But I knew better now. I started small, checking his calendar, glancing over his texts when he left his phone on the counter. He was careful, but not careful enough. The same dates he claimed to have late-night client meetings matched the hotel stay. And then a name started appearing more often than it should have, Carly Weston. The moment I saw it, my heart sank. Carly had been an intern at my old design firm, someone I had mentored years ago. She was bright, ambitious, always eager to learn. I had even recommended her to Declan once, thinking he could help her with contacts in real estate. I never imagined he'd help himself to her. I began to cross-check his calendar entries with her social media posts. It wasn't hard. She liked to show off the city views, the mystery dinners, the gifts from a secret admirer. I recognized one of the restaurants instantly. It was the same one Declan had once taken me to for our anniversary. The pieces fit together too perfectly to be coincidence. I started collecting proof quietly, screenshots, receipts, even photos when I followed him one afternoon. He didn't notice the black SUV parked across the street or the woman inside watching him walk hand in hand with her into a private lounge. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I didn't cry. I just took the pictures, each one colder than the last. Every part of me wanted to march into that lounge, throw the photos in his face, and scream until the walls shook. But then I realized, why should I give him that satisfaction? He wanted me to break, to fall apart. That was how he stayed powerful. So instead, I smiled when he came home that night. I kissed his cheek, listened to his stories about meetings, and pretended like I didn't already know everything. He was convinced I was still his obedient wife, still wrapped around his charm. He had no idea I was already building a case, not just against him, but for myself. A plan was forming, slow and steady, born from every insult he ever threw my way. That night, after he fell asleep, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My reflection looked unfamiliar, harder, sharper, alive. I stared into my own eyes, and for the first time, I saw strength instead of fear. Quietly, I whispered to myself, "You'll wish I stayed small." After weeks of silence and pretending, I knew I couldn't just sit there waiting for karma. I wanted to create my own. I went through my old laptop one night while Declan was asleep and found the number of my former mentor, Marceline Tate. She was a name people in the design world respected, fierce, elegant, and brutally honest. The last time we spoke, she had offered me a partnership opportunity, but Declan had convinced me to decline. "You don't need to chase crumbs when you already have the whole loaf," he'd said. I had listened then, but not anymore. My hands trembled a little as I texted her. I didn't expect a reply after so long, but within minutes my phone lit up. "Emily Green? I was wondering when you'd find your way back." Her message made me smile for the first time in weeks. We met the next morning at a quiet cafe downtown. She looked exactly the same, sharp eyes, silver hair, and a calm that commanded respect. When I told her I was ready to start again, she didn't ask about Declan or what had happened. She just nodded and said, "Then let's rebuild." I started collecting my old sketches, reworking designs I'd abandoned years ago. I used the small savings account Declan didn't know existed, money I'd tucked away from freelance jobs early in our marriage. Every evening, I'd dress up like I was heading to another charity function or fundraiser, the kind of events Declan loved to brag about. But instead of champagne and cameras, I sat in Marceline's studio, sketching, drafting, and rediscovering the woman I used to be. There was a strange peace in the secrecy. For the first time in years, I was living for myself again. The hours were long, but the exhaustion felt good, honest, earned. I told Declan I was taking up personal development courses to better support his image. He nodded approvingly, thinking I was becoming more devoted to his world. The irony made me laugh inside. But the more he saw me focus on something other than him, the more his patience started to crack. "You've been distant lately," he said one night over dinner. "Where are you even going these days?" I smiled and replied softly, "You told me to find something to occupy my time." That answer seemed to calm him, but I could tell he didn't like not knowing. A few weeks later, I got a call from Marceline that changed everything. One of her big clients needed a new designer, someone with fresh ideas and discretion. When she mentioned the client's name, my heart skipped. It was one of Declan's top investors, a man whose luxury apartment he had personally brokered. That evening, in a quiet office with Marceline by my side, I signed my first major contract under my own name. My hands didn't shake this time. I just smiled, thinking, he'll never see this coming. The night Declan found out I'd started working again, he stormed into the penthouse like a hurricane. I was setting up my laptop in the living room, trying not to make it obvious that I was on a client call, when he slammed the door behind him. His face was red, his jaw tight. "I can't believe you," he spat. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you act? Ungrateful, selfish." His words hit like punches, but I didn't flinch. I took a deep breath and let him run out of steam for a few moments, counting to 10 in my head. Then I said it, the words I had held in for weeks. "I know about Carly." His eyes went wide, the rage suddenly morphing into disbelief. "What? That's impossible. You're imagining things," he said, voice shaking. I stood my ground. "I've seen the hotel receipts, the texts, the dinners. I know everything." He laughed, a bitter, fake laugh that did nothing to hide his panic. "You're being dramatic. You're letting your jealousy ruin everything. You think you're some detective now? You should focus on being a wife, not an investigator." I let his words hang in the air, calm and measured, even as he lunged forward, trying to regain control of the conversation. "Do you even know what you'd be without me?" he yelled, voice cracking with desperation. "Nothing. You're nothing without my name, without my money, without everything I gave you." For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel scared. I looked at him quietly, taking in the man who had tried to cage me in his success, who had convinced me that my worth depended on his presence. "Then you'll recognize it when it's on the building I just redesigned," I said softly, but every word cut sharper than any scream. He froze. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I didn't wait for him to respond. I grabbed a single suitcase, packed the essentials, and walked out of the penthouse, leaving him in the shock of his own underestimation. He stood in the doorway, speechless, staring at the empty space where I had once been the picture of his perfect wife. By the time I reached my car, the tension inside me began to unravel. I slid into the driver's seat and let the weight of months, years, of pretending to be small, roll off my shoulders. My hands rested on the steering wheel, trembling slightly, not from sadness, but from the release of finally reclaiming control. I cried quietly, letting the tears fall freely, because for the first time, the tears were mine. Not tears for him, not tears for the life I had lost under his shadow, but tears for me, Amelie Green, the woman who had chosen herself. I started the engine, letting the hum of the car fill the quiet night, and for the first time in years, I felt the exhilarating, terrifying, liberating sense of freedom. I moved into Zola's apartment with just a suitcase and a sense of determination that felt heavier than any luxury I had ever owned. She hugged me tight when I arrived, her eyes scanning my face like she was measuring how much of me was left. "You're going to be okay," she said, and for the first time in weeks I believed her. I threw myself into my business full-time. No more pretending. No more hiding behind social events or charity galas. My days became a rhythm of client calls, site visits, and design sketches sprawled across every flat surface I could find. At first, people were skeptical. "You're just starting again?" a client asked, raising an eyebrow as if to say, "Why would I trust you?" I nodded politely, hiding the fire burning behind my calm smile. I didn't need their faith. I only needed their projects to prove what I could do. The nights were long. I'd stay up sketching new concepts, sipping coffee until my hands shook, ignoring the ache in my back. Rejection came often. "We already have a designer," or "Your style is interesting, but I refused to take it personally. Each no became fuel, each criticism a sharpening stone. I worked until the early hours, falling asleep with pencil marks on my hands and the hum of the city outside as my lullaby. Marceline, ever discreet, became my silent supporter. She didn't advertise our connection, didn't demand credit. She simply gave me access to resources and contacts I could never reach alone, letting me prove to myself that I could build something meaningful. The quiet mentorship was more powerful than any flashy title or large paycheck. It reminded me that my value didn't come from Declan or anyone else. It came from the work I created, the vision I had, and the care I put into every space I touched. Weeks turned into months. My small projects became known for a certain elegance and emotional depth. Designs that made people feel at home, even in the coldest penthouses. My reputation began to grow slowly but surely, not through connections or influence, but through craft and persistence. Every sketch, every late-night coffee, every tear and frustration poured into the work became part of a story clients could feel in the rooms I designed. And then it happened. I walked into the lobby of a major downtown hotel, one of Declan's firm's old properties, now under my complete design. The grand chandelier reflected the city lights, the walls whispered sophistication. The colors told a story that only someone who understood balance, loss, and triumph could tell. I paused at the center, letting my gaze sweep over every detail, the polished marble, the soft lighting, the subtle elegance of it all. For a moment, I just stood there, feeling the weight of what I had built on my own. This was my work, my life, my proof. And somehow, it felt sweeter knowing that the man who had tried to define my limits had no idea that the very space he once controlled now bore my vision. I smiled quietly to myself, inhaling the scent of fresh paint and opportunity, knowing that this was only the beginning that I heard about Declan's troubles before he ever called me. Whispers in the city, contracts falling through, investors pulling out, rumors of financial mismanagement. The man who once towered over everyone in boardrooms was suddenly stumbling, his empire crumbling quietly in the background. Carly left him too. At first, I didn't want to believe it. But when I saw her name pop up in a friend's social media story, she was smiling, suitcase in hand, looking free. His charm, his money, they had run out, and with them went the illusion of control he had over her. Then, one chilly morning, my phone rang. Declan. The name made my heart beat oddly, not with fear, but with curiosity. He asked to meet, calmly, hesitantly, almost like a man seeking forgiveness. I agreed. It was time to see him, to see how the man who once tried to cage me would face the woman he underestimated. I arrived at the cafe early, dressed simply but elegantly, carrying the quiet confidence I had earned. I ordered a coffee and sat near the window, watching the city move while I waited. When he came in, I noticed the lines around his eyes, the tightness in his shoulders, the way his expensive suit hung on him differently than it used to. He looked older, smaller, less certain. "Amelie," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I need to talk." I know things have changed, but I just want a chance to explain. I nodded politely, letting him speak, letting him try to weave his excuses, guilt, and charm together. You don't understand, he said, almost pleading. I've done everything for you. I gave you your life, your security. You owe me this, your gratitude, your loyalty, He trailed off, searching my face for fear, for guilt. I took a deep breath, feeling the calm I hadn't felt in years settle around me. Declan, I said slowly, evenly, I didn't owe you anything. I built this from the pieces you broke. He froze, the words hanging between us like a glass wall. What are you talking about? He asked, but his voice lacked conviction. I rebuilt myself. My career, my confidence, my life. You wanted me small, dependent, invisible. I refused. And now I'm here, me on my own, thriving. And it's not because of anything you gave me. It's because I refused to stay broken. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, flustered. He looked around, as if hoping someone would validate his version of events. But there was no one. There was only me, calm, composed, and unshaken. I sipped my coffee, letting him watch me for a moment longer before standing. The chair scraped lightly against the floor, and I gathered my bag. I have places to be, people to inspire, work to finish, I said softly. I hope you find your way too. And with that, I walked out. The autumn wind hit me, crisp and liberating, while behind me, Declan sat frozen, unable to speak, stunned into silence by the woman he once tried to define, and the life she had created without him. The day I found out I'd won the Horizon Design Award, I was sitting in my small studio, sketching the final touches for a client's apartment. My phone buzzed with a notification from Marceline. Check this out. I opened the link and froze. My name, bold and unmistakable, was listed among the winners. The article described me as a visionary designer whose work blends elegance with deep emotional resonance. I read it again, slowly, letting the words sink in. After years of doubt, betrayal, and struggle, I was finally being recognized. Not because of who I had married, not because of a name or money, but because of my talent, my perseverance, and my vision. Media outlets picked up the story quickly. Interviews, features, and social media posts celebrated the rebirth of Amelie Green, the woman who had quietly taken the city by storm with her designs. People wanted to know how I'd done it, how I'd rebuilt my life from nothing. I didn't mind sharing because my story wasn't about revenge. It was about growth, resilience, and claiming what was always mine. With the recognition came opportunities, and one of them changed everything. I found a penthouse suite for sale with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline of Atlanta. The same skyline Declan had once said belonged to men like him. The view he thought was reserved for the powerful, the untouchable. I walked through the apartment slowly, imagining how I could make it mine. Not as a trophy over him, but as a testament to the woman I had become. I signed the papers, and for the first time, a key to a home was truly mine. Redecorating the penthouse became a deeply personal project. No symbols of wealth or status. No glossy reminders of a life I had once felt trapped in. Instead, I filled it with pieces that spoke to me. Art that made my heart stir, textures that comforted, colors that reflected calm and hope. Every corner, every wall, every light fixture was chosen because it felt like me. The night I officially moved in, I hosted a small dinner for Zola and Marceline. The three of us sat around the dining table, glasses of wine in hand, laughter spilling through the open space. We talked about the long nights, the failures, the setbacks, and the moments that had almost broken us. But we also celebrated the victories, the freedom, and the growth that had carried us here. As I looked around at the faces of the women who had believed in me, who had stood by me when everything else seemed lost, I felt a wave of quiet triumph. Not over Declan, not over anyone who had doubted me, but over the fear, the self-doubt, and the smallness I had once accepted as my lot in life. For the first time in years, I sat back and let myself feel whole. The city lights twinkled beyond the windows, the laughter echoed through my new home, and I realized that I had not just reclaimed a life. I had created a life that was entirely, beautifully, and unapologetically my own. Sitting in my penthouse, the city lights flickering like tiny constellations beyond the windows, I finally let myself reflect on everything that had happened. For so long, I had believed that my life, my worth, and my happiness depended on someone else, on Declan, on approval, on a world I thought I needed to fit into. But what I've learned is that real power doesn't come from taking from others, or from tearing anyone down. It comes from reclaiming yourself, from standing in the space you create for yourself, and knowing that it is enough. Revenge isn't about destruction. It isn't about proving someone wrong or making them feel the sting you once felt. That kind of thinking keeps you tied to the person who hurt you. True victory comes from the quiet work you do when no one is watching. The late nights, the sacrifices, the rebuilding of every part of yourself that was made small. Every sketch, every design, every risk I took quietly while he thought I was still under his control became my way of saying, without words, that I would no longer be defined by anyone else. He told me I'd never reach his status. He laughed when I expressed my dreams, mocked the idea that I could build something on my own. But now, I can say with calm certainty that I've built a life beyond his luxury level. Not to surpass him, not to flaunt success in his face, but to live fully and freely without ever needing him again. That realization is sweeter than any applause, any award, or any recognition could ever be. It isn't about him, it's about me. I think back to those early nights of fear, confusion, and doubt, and I realize how far I've come. I went from pretending to be someone I wasn't, trapped in a life that looked perfect but felt hollow, to becoming a woman who defines her own world. The skyline I see from my balcony isn't a symbol of competition. It's a reminder of persistence, courage, and the quiet rebellion of claiming what is yours simply because you deserve it. I walk to the balcony and lock the door behind me, the click echoing softly in the empty room. I turn off the lights, letting the darkness embrace me for the first time in years without anxiety, without shame, without fear. I sink into my bed and feel a profound sense of peace settle over me. For so long, I chased approval, tried to fit into molds that weren't mine, and allowed someone else to define my limits. Tonight, I rest in the knowledge that my limits are my own, and my life is mine to shape. And as I drift into sleep, I carry no anger, no grudges, only quiet power, serene victory, and the freedom of knowing that I am whole, unshaken, and truly free. Do you think Amelie made the right choice by leaving Declan and building her own life, or should she have confronted him differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your take. And if stories like this inspire you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new one.